Earlier today, I was thinking about the idea of anesthetics. What is an anesthetic? An anesthetic is something that a doctor can apply so that basically we don't feel pain. There's been a lot of times in my life where I've either had to have stitches or I've had a minor surgery, and the doctor had to apply anesthesia so that I wouldn't feel the pain. A couple months ago, I had a number of moles removed off my back because they were suspicious, and you know, nowadays people can have skin cancer. So what the doctor basically did is he applied a little topical lotion, and then he did small injections, and the end result was he actually was able to use a scalpel and remove the moles from the middle of my back. I didn't even feel any pain. Well, thank God we have anesthesia like that. Can you imagine what it would have been like even 50 years ago, 100 years ago, if you had a broken bone or a toothache, a headache, or God forbid, some horrific injury, and you didn't have painkillers and the things we have nowadays? As I was thinking about painkillers, though, one of the things that crossed my mind is, you know, nobody wants to, have pain. We all want pleasure, and rightfully so. But that's really not the nature of life. I don't believe God ever designed life or ever intended that it would have sorrow and sadness and sickness and things like that. But it does. And the result is, a lot of times what people do is, rather than face the pain of broken relationships and face the pain of some of the bad things in life that happen, like the sickness or the loss of a job or any of the other traumas, people do the same thing as an anesthetic. They numb out their heart. They don't allow themselves to feel the pain of what's going on. And I think Solomon really captured this poetically in Ecclesiastes. I believe it's chapter 3, verses 1 through 8. And he said, there's a time to laugh and a time to mourn, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to sow and a time to reap. Life has its seasons. And like I said, God didn't intend that life would be painful, but the fact is that it is now. But God also doesn't want us to be fully engaged. He wants us to be able to approach life head on without numbing our heart, and to be able to address those things straight up. But there's only one way we can do it, and that's we have to have God as part of our life. The only way to be fully engaged in life is to be fully engaged in God. Because if we're not, then what happens is we're going to do things that numb our heart out. For many years, I poured myself into work, career, things like that. It's very easy. You can numb out and not have to address the real problems that are facing you, because you're going to use something else to cause it to divert you, so you don't have to face those issues. Many people they fill up their day with all kinds of activities just so they don't have to face the reality and the harshness of some of the things going on in their life. And clearly, people have always used sex and drugs and alcohol and things like that. And even if something is a good thing in life, if it's done in the wrong way or done to an extreme, then it can be a bad thing. One of the most difficult things in life to do is to really be fully engaged in love. And Jesus said very clearly that the greatest commandment is to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. So that's number one. If we're going to be fully engaged in life, we have to do that. Then we can love others. And we're to love others as we love ourselves. And the problem is, though, that a lot of people, avoid loving others or really being completely vulnerable and exposed, because there's always the pain of rejection, and there are broken relationships, and they do hurt. They pierce the heart. C.S. Lewis once said, "To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything, and your heart will certainly be wrung and possibly broken." Well, God doesn't want our hearts wrung and broken. But the reality is, when we're vulnerable, when we put ourselves out like that, then we run the risk of having our heart hurt. The answer is not to withdraw. The answer is not to not love. God really didn't give us much option. Jesus, as I said, greatest commandment, love God. The next one's like it, love your neighbor. There's no excuses in that. So if we're going to do what God wants us to do, which is to be fully engaged in life, then we need to be fully engaged in God and fully engaged in others, and then that's the only way we can do it. I just don't think there's any other way, because we can't be fully engaged in life without having God to help us through life. There are some things that are just too traumatic, too hurtful, and the end result is if you don't have God to lean on, then you're going to pull back and you're going to use something to numb out your heart. Just like I can numb out a toothache, I can numb out my heart, and I can deaden the issues of my heart so I don't have to think about the pain of rejection, the pain of the loss of relationships and other things like that. But when I'm fully engaged with God, then He makes a way for me. He clears the path through life so that I can deal with those issues, because I know ultimately in God's hands I'm safe and secure. So what's the point of all of this? Well, don't numb out. Don't do the things that we would look to try to avoid the pain of life. God wants us fully engaged. So I encourage you, examine your life. Look at your relationships. Are you engaged in those things, or have you retreated? Are you hiding away? Are you holding back? Because if you are, then you're really not fully engaged in life, and you're not living the life that God desires for you. There's only one way to live that kind of life. Fully engaged in God will make you fully engaged in life.